So let's unpack this. When most people think ancient Egypt, it's usually the big stuff. Sphinx, pyramids, very general.
Yeah, a postcard view.
Exactly. But today we are going deep on three really specific, quite small, but kind of stunning archaeological finds.
And these finds, they really challenge how we understand, well, everything. Power, security, even ancient engineering. It's fascinating stuff.
We're talking about sources covering a tiny gold coin discovery in Jerusalem that sort of remaps the Hellenistic world.
And a real-life mechanical booby trap designed to crush tomb robbers, which, spoiler alert, failed. But how it failed is the interesting part.
And then there's this 5,000-year-old artifact. Really mysterious. It's kicked off this huge debate about, well, ancient chemistry of all things.
So yeah, this is a deep dive that gets past the famous pharaohs. We're zooming right in on the details, the technology, the politics that often surprise even us specialists.
Our mission, really, is to get you beyond that tourist map. We want to explore these specific details that show how complex these ancient societies actually were. We're connecting queens, guards, strange objects.
You're basically getting a shortcut today to being, well, extremely well-informed on a very niche but very cool corner of history.
Let's jump right in then, starting with the gold.
Okay, so we begin in Jerusalem, in the city of David National Park, actually. Archaeologists unearthed this miniature gold coin. It's about 2,270 years old.
Miniature, okay, what kind?
It's a quarter drachma, but the really extraordinary thing, its composition. We're talking 99.3% pure gold.
Wow. That's incredibly pure, nearly perfect.
Yeah.
And finding this type of coin there is unusual, isn't it? Especially in a proper dig.
Absolutely. It's the first time this specific type has been found outside Egypt in what we call a controlled archaeological context. It tells us something immediately.
So who's on it, and when's it from?
The portrait is Queen Berenice II of Egypt. She was the wife of Ptolemy III. And the coin dates to his reign, roughly 246 to 241 BC. It was likely minted in Alexandria.
Alexandria, the Ptolemaic capital. Why would it end up in Jerusalem?
Well, the thinking is, the sources suggest this was probably part of a donative, like a high-value bonus payment for soldiers.
Oh, like a reward.
Exactly. For soldiers coming back from the Third Syrian War, Ptolemy III had actually led that campaign himself. So imagine these soldiers maybe passing through or stationed near Jerusalem, carrying this high-purity gold.
A gold bonus from Egypt found in Jerusalem. Okay, let's talk about Queen Berenice II herself, because you said her portrait's on it. Does that tell us something about her actual clout, not just, being the king's wife?
It tells us a lot. So yes, one side has her portrait wearing the royal diadem necklace, standard queen imagery, you might think.
What?
But the other side has this ancient Greek inscription, Basilis's,
which means
of the queen, literally. Now, putting her portrait and that title on currency minted while her husband was king, that suggests exceptional political power. She wasn't just a figurehead.
And her backstory supports that, doesn't it? She wasn't new to ruling.
Correct. She'd already been queen regnant, meaning ruling in her own right of Cyrenaica. That's modern eastern Libya.
Right, before she even married Ptolemy.
Exactly. And then, when Ptolemy III went off to invade Syria, she acted as regent of Egypt. She was running the country, making major decisions while he was away fighting.
So putting her face and title on the money was a clear statement, recognizing her authority.
A very deliberate political statement, yes.
Okay, so if this coin represents top-tier Hellenistic power, high status, what does finding it in Jerusalem mean for our view of the city back then, in the 3rd century BC?
This is maybe the biggest implication. For a long time, the sort of standard scholarly view of Jerusalem in that period, after the first temple was destroyed in 586 BC, was that it was pretty small, poor, peripheral.
Kind of a struggling outpost.
Yeah, a dusty little town trying to get back on its feet. But finding this coin, this incredibly high status, nearly pure gold coin, likely used for a massive military payout.
That just flips that narrative completely.
Precisely. It suggests that Jerusalem in the 3rd century BC wasn't peripheral at all. It was recovering strongly. It was plugged into the main trade routes, the economic networks of the Hellenistic world.
Connected to the big players, like Ptolemaic Egypt.
Definitely. It had enough wealth, enough strategic importance for this premium Alexandrian currency to be circulating there. It wasn't struggling. It was a functioning node in that whole regional power network.
That's a huge shift in perspective from one tiny object.
Amazing.
Okay, let's pivot from royal politics and trade to royal security. Now, ancient Egyptian tombs. Everyone thinks booby traps, right? Like Indiana Jones style.
Oh yeah, the classic movie image. Swinging blades, poison darts.
But Egyptologists are pretty clear that's mostly fantasy, isn't it?
Right. Emphatically, yes. Those kinds of cinematic traps are basically unknown in reality. The real focus wasn't on, flashy traps. It was on architectural deterrence. Meaning making it incredibly hard, physically demanding, and time-consuming to actually get into the tomb. Using massive stone blocks, hidden passages, complex layouts. The goal was to make teams of robbers just give up or run out of time before they could get caught.
Okay, so deterrence, not death traps. However, there's one place, isn't there? The Pyramid of Amenemhat II at Lish from the 12th dynasty. That one comes pretty close to an actual mechanical trap.
It really does. Lish is kind of the exception that proves the rule, and the engineering there is, frankly, incredible.
Tell us about it. How did they try to secure that tomb?
The security system in the descending passage was multi-layered. First, they plugged it with standard squared granite blocks, already tough to get through.
Right, big, heavy granite.
But then behind those, they placed these enormous round granite drums, about 85 centimeters in diameter, like huge stone cylinders.
Earthbound. Okay, that's different.
And then behind those, even smaller drums made of gneiss.
Gneiss. I'm not a geologist, remind me.
It's a metamorphic rock. Very hard, very heavy. The choice of materials wasn't accidental. Weight and durability were key.
Okay, so squared blocks, then big round granite drums, then smaller, super hard gneiss drums. Why this sequence? What was the trap mechanism supposed to be?
It was designed as a specific counter to how robbers usually worked. The typical method was to avoid the hard passage blocks by tunneling around the passage itself through the softer surrounding rock or masonry.
Trying to bypass the main plug.
Exactly. So the designers figured if robbers did that, they'd eventually break through into the chamber or well shaft at the very end of the descending passage.
And lying in wait for them.
Were the drums. Once the robbers breached that final chamber, the idea was that the disturbance, or maybe removing a final keystone, would trigger those heavy round granite and gneiss drums further up the passage.
Gravity.
Gravity-powered hazard, exactly. The passage sloped downwards. So these massive drums were meant to just roll down, crushing anyone in the passage, or at the very least blocking the way completely and permanently.
That is genuinely brilliant. A mechanical gravity-powered security system. But we know it didn't work. The tomb was robbed. How on earth did they just eat that?
It just goes to show criminal ingenuity, right? The robbers, and we know roughly when they were active because they left behind 13th dynasty oil lamps.
So a bit later than the pyramid itself.
Yes, maybe a century or so later, they clearly realized the scale of this plugging system. They saw those massive drums, and they figured out the intended trap.
So they didn't try to tunnel around the sides?
No, that's what the designers expected. Instead, they tunneled underneath, right beneath the granite floor blocks of the main passage itself.
Underneath the whole thing. That sounds incredibly risky.
Incredibly risky and incredibly difficult. But by doing that, they destabilized the floor of the passage from below.
Causing it to collapse.
Parts of it, yes. The floor blocks buckled, shifted, dropped. And crucially, this meant some of the huge drums above them also shifted, dropped slightly, or got jammed.
So the collapse they caused actually jammed the trap mechanism.
Exactly. It stopped the drums from being able to roll freely down the passage. They defeated the gravity trap by inducing a structural failure. It's astounding, really, the level of planning and effort.
It really is. You have to admire the sheer tenacity, even if they were robbing a tomb. And it wasn't just architecture, right? There were human guards, too.
Yeah.
And the punishments were severe.
Oh, absolutely. Especially later, say in the 20th dynasty, the penalties for captured tomb robbers were brutal. We have records. Often involved disfigurement, cutting off ears and nose, followed by impalement. A very serious deterrent.
Grim. And we even have evidence of the day-to-day policing, don't we? Like that whistle.
That's right. A fascinating little find from Akhetaten. A 3,300-year-old whistle carved from a cow's toe bone.
A police whistle made from bone.
Likely used by the guards known as the entisha, or shums. These were the guys policing the workers' villages near the royal tombs, like Deir el-Medina, keeping an eye on things.
But their job was bigger than just guarding tombs, wasn't it?
Much bigger. They were more like the king's personal security detail and logistics corps rolled into one. They guarded the king, escorted him on hunts or during victory parades, transported important goods, protected state property. They were the visible human element of security, backed up by these architectural defenses and the threat of horrific punishment.
Okay, so we've covered political power shown through currency and security through, well, ingenious engineering and brutal enforcement. Let's move to our final piece, maybe the most enigmatic, the Sabu Disk.
Ah, the Sabu Disk, yes. This one is a real head-scratcher. It fuels one of the biggest debates about just how sophisticated ancient Egypt was, especially early on.
So what is it, where, and when is it from?
It was found, broken unfortunately, in the tomb of a high official, a Prince Sabu. And it dates way back to the First Dynasty. We're talking 3100 to 3000 BCE. That's before the Old Kingdom, before the famous pyramids at Giza.
First Dynasty, okay, so very early. And what does it look like?
It's quite large, over 2 feet, about 61 centimeters in diameter. But here's the crucial thing. It's made from metasilt stone, sometimes called schist.
And that material is important because...
Because it's incredibly fragile. It's layered. It's brittle. It flakes easily. This immediately tells us it couldn't possibly be something functional, like a wheel or any kind of heavy machinery part that needs to spin or bear weight. That's often the first guess people have, but the material just rules it out.
No, it would just shatter. So if it's not a wheel, what's the mainstream explanation, the traditional view?
The consensus among most Egyptologists is that, given the material and the era, it's likely a highly skilled, probably ceremonial object, a type of wide, shallow dish or bowl.
Like for offerings?
Exactly, a libation dish, used for pouring offerings, maybe anointing liquids in rituals. We know First Dynasty artisans were experimenting with complex shapes in metasilt stone bowls around this time. It would have likely sat on a stand, maybe a wooden post or tripod. The slight asymmetry in its lobes suggests hand carving by a master craftsman, not machine precision.
Okay, that sounds plausible. Ceremonial, skillfully made, fits the fragile material.
Yeah.
But there's a radical alternative theory, isn't there? One that involves technology.
There is, and it's far more, well, dramatic. This alternative theory completely rejects the ceremonial idea. It proposes that the Sabu disk wasn't a dish at all, but a crucial component in an ancient chemical manufacturing process.
Chemical manufacturing. In 3000 BCE, what process?
Specifically, proponents argue it was part of a solvay-like process, an ammonia soda process, the goal, to produce high-purity natron, which is sodium carbonate.
Natron. Wait, isn't that the salt they use for mummification?
The very same, essential for drying out the body. So this theory basically suggests the Sabu disk is evidence of, pre-industrial chemical hardware designed to mass produce a key ingredient for their most important funerary ritual.
That's a huge claim. What's the argument based on? Why would this disc shape be useful for that?
The argument hinges on the disk's very strange, complex design. It has that central dome, the turned-over rim, and there's 3 curved lobes folding back towards the center. Proponents claim this specific geometry is actually highly efficient for facilitating a counterflow chemical reaction.
Counterflow, like mixing liquids and gases effectively.
Precisely. Something needed for an ammonia soda process. A process, by the way, that wasn't reinvented in the modern world until the 1860s by Ernest Solvay.
So the intricate shape isn't just decorative flourish in this view. It's functional chemical engineering, thousands of years ahead of its time.
That's the core of the claim. Now, obviously, the metasilt stone disk itself is too fragile to be the actual working part in a chemical reactor.
Right. So what was it then? A model.
That's the idea. That the disk found in Prince Sabu's tomb was perhaps an ornamental representation, a model, maybe celebrating an invention he oversaw or a technology he was associated with. The actual working component, they suggest, would have been made from something much more durable, maybe bronze, maybe lined ceramic.
Is there any other evidence that points towards this kind of early chemical industry?
Well, this is where it gets really speculative, but proponents try to link the disk to other enigmatic finds. For example, those massive cracked stone basins found at Abu Ghorab, which date to a similar early period.
What's the connection?
The radical theory suggests those huge basins weren't for religious purposes, but were actually large-scale chemical reaction tanks. And the cracks you see in them, possibly caused by thermal stress, the kind of stress you'd get from the heating, and, crucially, the cooling cycles required to run this kind of chemical process efficiently.
Wow. So a fragile disk, potentially linked to massive, cracked industrial tanks from 5,000 years ago. That's quite a leap from a ceremonial bowl.
It's a huge leap. And highly debated, obviously, but it forces you to ask fundamental questions.
Okay, so let's try and pull these threads together. We've had this tiny gold coin reshaping our view of Jerusalem's place in the world.
Yeah, connecting it directly to powerful Hellenistic queens like Berenice II and major geopolitical events, showing it wasn't some isolated backwater.
Then we have the Great Pyramid security system. Not Hollywood traps, but sophisticated mechanical engineering designed to stop robbers.
Like that incredible rolling drum system, a gravity-powered deterrent, even though, incredibly clever robbers still managed to find a way around it eventually, shows the eternal cat-and-mouse game.
And finally, the Sabu Disk. A single, fragile object from the dawn of Egyptian history that sparks this debate. Was it a sacred dish or a blueprint for industrial chemistry?
It really forces us to reconsider the foundations of pharaonic power. Was it just about religion, monumental building, and military might? Or did it also involve, right from the start, a level of technological and, dare I say, scientific prowess that we're only beginning to appreciate? Maybe focused on essentials like neutron production.
It definitely shifts the perspective, thinking about the very basis of their society.
Yeah.
And, speaking of unsolved mysteries and things left behind, we talked about how the robbers defeated the trap at Lish by tunneling underneath.
Right, they jammed the drums by collapsing the floor.
But you mentioned the passage led down to a well chamber or a vertical shaft. The very thing the whole drum system was ultimately designed to protect. Has it ever been properly explored?
That's the tantalizing part. As far as current publications go, that final vertical shaft, the one the drums were guarding, remains unexcavated, blocked by the debris from the robbery and the jammed drums.
So down there at the bottom of a 4,000-year-old defeated security system, there could still be something. Untouched.
Exactly. What secrets, or maybe even more technological surprises, might still be waiting at the bottom of that shaft? We simply don't know.
Now, that is definitely something for you to mull over until our next deep dive.